Afternoon. It's Quant Trade Edge, and today I wanted to talk about MicroStrategies, which has put in a very massive red candle. And I wanted to go through the logic that let me know this was going to happen yesterday. And I posted it on Twitter, informed some of my friends who had recommended to buy this thing to get out, and got out myself, and even shorted it for a little bit today. So there were two things that bothered me about this. One is just when you look for Fibonacci extensions on the weekly, this is the last consolidation. We've gone straight up, every bar here being a higher low except this one, which was an outside bar, since September. So when you look at extensions on this weekly, usually 1.272 is very conservative, 1.618 is doable. The rest of these I consider blow-offs. And the highest one of these came in at 520. And that is what prompted me to post this on Twitter yesterday, I guess 1:01 p.m. yesterday, that just said 520 is as far as I can project. This extension here on the weekly was 520, and this little extension of this 15-minute pennant, to the 1.618 came to about 520. So that's why I did that. Now, there's another thing. That's just one item, right? That's not enough to go blindly want to do this. The other item is what I call exhaustion. And exhaustion has to do with the very short-term RSI, a 2-period RSI. And when the 2-period RSI closes above 95, like it did here, typically the next day a gap up is going to fill the gap. And a reasonable target is actually the average of the last 2 days close. So that would have been between here and here. And let me just clear out all these other lines so they're not distracting, and just keep that 50% line. And so usually that would have happened yesterday, but it didn't happen yesterday, and we gapped up again. So that made it a really extended situation where the odds were we're going to revert. And when we reverted, where did we go to? We went to this average of these 2 days close, which is what should have happened yesterday, but didn't. And we got it today. So, two things. One being that the weekly, we couldn't project up any further than 520 on the weekly, going to the 4.236 extension, which is very far. I usually only use those for very long-term projections. But then the shorter-term, more precise execution is RSI2 greater than 95 gapping up, and then it stayed an unfilled gap here, and yesterday we didn't actually get it, and then gap up again. So that's what essentially did it. And then on a short-term chart, what you could do is you could use the first 5 minute as an entry. Right? If this was going to continue higher, like for example yesterday, if you used the first 5 minute, as an entry, it kind of, entered, went up. It just kind of went sideways all day. It didn't give you one direction or the other. But then this gap up really was as far as she could go, and you kind of got, you see the picture of how you could enter with minimal risk. This here, it's not minimal, I call it $23, a $23 candle, but we're $115 lower. So that's 5 times your risk, down to 405, or this was our expected target, this 50% level. Based on that opening 5-minute candle, you got 5 times your risk there. So anyway, this was an interesting one. I thought it would be timely because, the news cycle all of a sudden turned positive to MSTR yesterday. I was listening to CNBC in the evening, and people were talking about how Michael Saylor's a genius, and, his cost of goods is really the rate at which he can borrow fiat, which is, he's doing convertible notes at 0%. and his return on invested capital is the return of Bitcoin, which is 100% a year. And while all of that might be true, honestly, to me, it feels like he's legally structured a Ponzi scheme. And so I don't think this would necessarily grow to the sky. I mean, it can definitely go higher. In fact, if we look at the daily chart, the last time this happened was actually here. We had RSI 2 greater than 95 here, but then notice we didn't gap up. This was also RSI 2 greater than 95, and then we did gap up, and we went down. And it was just a 2-day correction, consolidation, next leg. Is that what's going to happen here? I don't know. It could be. I tend to think it needs a longer consolidation, but I don't know. It could be. And let me see, what was I going to look at here? The DMI difference. That's the wrong one. The DMI difference is something that can signal a climax. So when you have a close above 40, like we did here, it was 50. And if we get a close below 30, which right now it's 29.06, that indicates a major climax. So I'm going to be watching this closely to see where it closes. And this is a 14-period ADX. The DMI positive minus the DMI negative gives you a net of plus 50 here, which is extreme. And then for it to go from above 40 to below 30 in one day, this is showing 29.06. If it closes here, that's definitely a climax. So I would, it doesn't mean it has to puke immediately. It could go back up to here, and then puke. But if we get that, that's definitely going to be something I put into my calculus for trading Bitcoin and in particular MicroStrategies.